Now, we've joked off stage that like part of the allure of the band is the amp setup, but part of how you guys use them is kind of part of they're musically part of the band, a band member. So let's meet some of the other band members here.
I mean, for me, my philosophy is that I'm just part of this bigger circuit of the instrumentation, which is, of course, the amplifier, the speaker, the valves, of course, the different various voltage filters, essentially, that are effects pedals, and the air and feedback. So, like, who's in the band? It's a bit more like a material and the ego of the people.
Yeah,
that's the way I do it. But certainly, these amps are I would say, the main characters of the band.
Now, I assume that we'll just split it down the middle, and this is kind of your setup, okay?
Yeah, that's how we're doing it.
And then when I did a rundown with Matt Pike with Sleep, he had 8 or 9 oranges, and he was using them almost as different EQs.
Yeah.
Like some of them would be more bassy, and some more treble.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing, or are they all just set equally the same and just pure volume, or are they EQ'd differently to complement the whole thing?
Well, these amps are 50. Some are about 50 years old, and some are about my age, a little less than 50 years old. So, over that time, they've been any sort of maintenance that's happened, of course, and modding by the various owners. So those 50 years, they got different characters. So there's a bit of that approach. Like, I would say rather there are different iterations of the same instrument that are tuned differently.
Okay.
Yeah, and part of that tuning could be EQ, but a lot of it has to do, for me, with the saturation on the input and the output saturation. So there's, I guess, kind of in a nutshell, my concept of playing this music for tone involves just many, many, many different gain stages that are all intonated differently depending on the pitch of the sound, and including the different gain stages in the amps, of course, and also the gain stages in the speaker.
That's
the
what
speaker folding and all of this type of thing, and the comb filtering that happens with the speaker folding.
I was going to ask, is there a specific like speaker that you seek out, or is it just kind of what you guys kind of obtain, or have you found certain speakers do certain things to what the whole enterprise is doing?
I'm kind of into that. When we're on tour in the States, we do a lot of rented backlines, so we can't get so specific. But at home, I have a lot of lower wattage speakers and greenbacks and stuff, like 30 and 20 watt speakers.
Okay.
On this tour, we're using just like SIR 412 Celestion 75s, but and then we're also borrowing some of the stuff from the new Sound City, Neil Osterberg.
Okay.
And these are new Fanes in here. We still have these are Fane 70s, I think, in this. F70Gs in these. These are 2 Fryette stacks. One is older, and I think these all have 50 watt speakers in them. I'm not really familiar with this brand. It's just Neil from Sound City also works for them, and he offered. We have so many cabinets. It's great to. SIR's rates now are ridiculous, so it's nice to have some variation in the speaker cabinets and also collaborators and people too.
And then, just so everyone knows at home, if they're keeping score, obviously, is everything on all the time, or are you switching between amps and engaging them, like you said, the gain stages, or the amp's always on and everything else you're doing is guitar volume and the pedals? How are you adjusting
the Sunn,
the dynamics and stuff? Okay, the Sunns are always on.
Dynamics, I use the volume pedal a lot, and also just on the, I would say most, the real fine tuning is just coming through the volume of the guitar, of course, but there's various paths that I use here for different slight shades of color saturation or grain. Like if it's a paint, then it's the shorter bandwidth color gradation or the density of the paint.
Yeah,
I would say with the density of the pigment.
Especially in the early days, our idea was to play through as many cabinets and amps as we could get our hands on, and we were young and broke, and and didn't have much, so we would just try to borrow things and cobble things together, and then eventually, you just kind of accumulate gear, and back 20 years ago, it was also 25 years ago, it was a lot cheaper,
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's dive into a little bit more, like Steven said, the other characters in the band. We covered the guitars, so what should we know about your amp setup and how are you using everything?
Well, it's the Model Ts. I mean, it's pretty. I try to keep things pretty simple on the front end because these Ts are they're killer. They're the killer powerful amp. And I started off in the mid '90s with one of these things, and which is I think this one, and then eventually just started adding to them and developing the wall of sound. With these things. I lived in Seattle, Washington, and I had gone to a basement show in Olympia, Washington, and I saw this band called Lice that had this really great guitar player named Tim Green, and Tim Green was in bands before that like Nation of Ulysses and the Fucking Champs. He was in that band too.
Okay.
So he was in this new heavy band that I had heard about. And I went and saw him in this basement, and he was playing a Model T. And I immediately was like, what is that? Because I'd seen, growing up in the Northwest, you'd seen a lot of Sunn solid state stuff. And like, I was really familiar with it because of Buzz from the Melvins, for example. And I really liked, his sound was very influential. And so he was using these solid state, smaller Sunn heads. And they were everywhere, in all the pawn shops everywhere. But I'd never seen, a larger thing that had tubes in it. So I talked to Tim after that show, and he told me about, it's a Model T. It's made by Sunn. It's tube amps, and it was just so powerful. So I immediately wanted to, I had to have one, and I found this one in in an area called Fremont in Seattle at a flea market. It was like a flea market, indoor flea market in a basement, and this guy had a bunch of like old records on the shelf, and then like underneath the shelf was this. I saw the Model T, and I was like, oh my God, there it is, And I'm like, hey, what's up with that? He's like, you want that? I'm like, yeah. Well, what's the deal? And so I got it for really, really cheap, and he's like, yeah, get it out of here. This thing's heavy, and I'm tired of carrying it around.
He was happy to unload it.
Yeah, it's a lot of clean power. So you can put I usually put a Rat in front of it, and that's the sound. I mean, of course the guitar is very important in that too, but that's the sound that I've been working with for all these years.
Yeah,
it really hasn't changed much, So.
And I was asking Steven, is there anything that you do in EQ wise in terms of like the amp individually themselves, but then also as a collective? Are the amps kind of a different version of EQ, or is it everything's just working together in terms of like everything's dialed similarly?
Everything's dialed very similar.
Okay.
I'm not getting anything. I'm not going for anything different or having one that's like a different character than the other. It's like it's more about just stacking stacks and stacks of and a wall of sound. So it's like I don't do much different. Sometimes I'll tweak. Sometimes these amps, obviously they can sound different too. So sometimes I'll tweak it here and there if I hear something like, oh, I think this needs a little more treble on it, or I need to reduce the bass on this. So sometimes I'll do that, but it's so minimal, and minute that it's not, they're the same pretty much.
Got it. And a similar setup with the amp pegs being like this one's running and then slaving into these.
Yeah, so it's this one here. I mean, and these are rentals. So we don't. I don't own these, but I love using them. And this is something that I would use really only in Sunn. Any other group I've played in, I haven't played any.
Yeah,
haven't played a bass rig as well. It's more. It's like other bands I play guitar in. It's been like maybe 2 stacks of with the Model Ts, but. The Ampeg is something that we use in Sunn exclusively live.
Okay.
And yeah, we've got a slave here. This one is slaved, and then this is a backup actually, because these tend to go down here and there, So we try to we're prepared,
Well, I was curious about how much you bring in terms of like an amp technician or someone that can handle that, and then also backups, because we did AC/DC 2016. And
I love that one.
Yeah, and Angus
great,
was
yeah.
blasting like 9 or 10 Marshalls.
Yeah.
And he's like hot as hell, and they're burning out. So
Yeah.
like they're switching in and out amps all these different
And he's got
shows.
a guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So that's great with that. Yeah, we have a guy that's amazing. This guy Ryan Rapp. He's our guy. Like we won't leave home without him now. You know,
Yeah.
he's just like he is.
He's a MacGyver.
He's an amazing amp tech, and he knows these things really well. And so we you know I mean these things are. You know, these things are over 50 years old, so
Insane.
it's like, you know, it's an antique roadshow is what this is. So,
A very loud one.
A very loud antique roadshow. So yeah, so he, you know, we need to have somebody that's like that knows the stuff because yeah, these things tend to go down, but we're not playing them. You know, we're not running them like they're, you know, they're all being run. And they're able to take what we give it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not like we're like abusing these things. It's more, you know, it's. I mean, we've figured out over the years
Oh, I bet.
how to use them, and it's the sound that this is the sound of the band. You
Yeah.
know, almost more than anything. So the amps.